After Danger Russ left this offseason, many wrote the Seahawks off the page, but behind one of the most unlikely studs in Geno Smith, they had become a contender once again. So how did this happen?
Geno flush from the pocket, throws it at the last second, and what a throw to DK Metcalf! Metcalf stays on his feet!
Russell Wilson has been traded to the Denver Broncos.
Following the news breaking that Russell was leaving Seattle after nearly a decade, the number of unknowns around the future of the Seahawks only grew and grew, especially considering the very unique quarterback situation. In the trade, Seattle got good old Drew Lock, who was in the mix for the starting spot with the underrated vet in Geno Smith. In what was quite an interesting battle for the number one spot, Geno eventually won going into the season, but there were still very few expectations on what he would do on a team that had been struggling with consistency the past few years. The last time that Geno actually started was back in 2014, so needless to say, there were quite a few questions around what he could bring to a team that just lost their best quarterback in franchise history. It seemed like quite a bit of pressure to put on someone who has taken the backseat for pretty much a decade, but then again, some of the most unlikely players are the ones that do what most others couldn't. I don't know if the trip to Seattle gave Geno some of that West Virginia magic, but in the 4 games that he played the previous year behind Russell, he was pretty dang good. Not the largest sample size, but the level of play was impressive, even though it didn't lead to many wins as they went 1-3 in that time. Keep in mind that it was a Seahawks team that went 7-10 with Russie under center, so it wasn't anything all that surprising. But nonetheless, following what was a pretty impressive stint as a starter, and on what was nearly the same team going into the following week, you would probably expect the same results. But actually, it was quite a bit different.
It's Homer picked it up briefly, and Smith flips, wide open, caught, just lead.
From the very beginning, you could tell that something had changed in Seattle, as Geno was able to put together nearly a perfect game as he led the Seahawks to a win against good old Danger Russ and the Broncos. Although the momentum didn't carry into the match against San Francisco, and then they lost in a shootout to Atlanta. At the very least, Geno proved that he could play some good football.
Wade throws to the end zone. Oh, what a catch! DK Metcalf! A rocket from Geno Smith!
Looking to steady the ship in what was one of the high-scoring games of the season, Geno's over 300 yards and 2 touchdowns helped the Seahawks take out what was a very interesting Lions team. But rough enough, once again they weren't able to maintain the same swag against New Orleans, although it was more so a result of rough defensive play, since Geno tossed an impressive nearly 270 and 3 touchdowns. Even though the team was now sitting at 2-3, in that time the Smithster had thrown 9 touchdowns along with only 2 picks, so I guess it was inevitable that the tides had to turn eventually, and trust me, they did.
They're throwing it around the yard when you thought they'd be running. Double move!
Lock it on the sideline!
4 wins in a row was not too shabby a way to respond to such an underwhelming start, and was able to launch Seattle into the playoff picture, even though it seemed like a dream going into such a unique season. Not only just that, but Geno himself was playing some Pro Bowl caliber football, and by this time people started to notice as he was elevating what many thought was simply a team in rebuild mode. And even though he was doing great, he also had some help in the form of the rookie stud Kenneth Walker, who was on demon timing during their win streak with a ridiculous over 400 yards and 6 touchdowns.
Geno will turn around and hand it off, and there's Walker's first big run of the game, and it's a huge hole! Kenneth Walker!
Seattle was just firing on all cylinders, so it seemed like the sky was the limit for their potential, but then reality decided to check back in.
Here they come. Pressure. Picked off!
After what was an impressive string of wins, Seattle lost 4 of their next 5 to drop back down to 7-8 as they shuffled down the division while the good old Brock Purdy-led 49ers started to go ham.
The throw, pressure coming, steps away, looking to run, and he walks it in for the touchdown!
Thankfully, both LA and Arizona were no competition, so Seattle still had a chance even after the rough streak, but there was absolutely no guarantees considering all the unknowns around whether or not the team could actually bounce back. It was up to Geno and the Seahawks to finish off strong and show that they wanted it more than the other teams in their spot. And you know what? I would say their 23-6 smacking the Jets proved that and much more.
Geno Smith to throw and has time. Floats one for the end zone. Catch me!
Against his old team, Geno put up a solid performance as his nearly 200 yards and 2 touchdowns helped Seattle get back to 500, and upon that gave them some momentum going against LA. The Rams weren't exactly the toughest challenge to close off the season, but it sure did seem like that as Geno had his worst game of the season behind 2 picks as the game somehow made its way to overtime.
And hope springs eternal!
Thankfully they were able to close it out in OT, but to say that the game wasn't an absolute nail-biter would be a massive understatement. Nonetheless, Geno and the Seahawks won, and we're now sitting at 9-8 with their entire playoff chances riding on whether or not Detroit would take out Discount Double Check and the Packers at good old Lambeau. In what was one of the most exciting duels of the season, Green Bay and Detroit duked it out to the very end, but when it counted, the Lions came up clutch.
Here you'd expect them to run. They do against St. Brown, who pitches it back to Swift, who's on the run. Swift inside the 20.
Somehow, someway, Seattle was back in the playoffs, and this time without Danger Russ at the helm. And in only a few days of me writing this, or probably a few days before you're even seeing this, they are going up against Brock Purdy and the 49ers. It's quite a matchup considering the fact that San Francisco took them out both times in the regular season. But trust me, when the playoffs roll around, anything is possible. If you got this far into the video, it'd be really dope if you could subscribe, like, turn on post notifications, and comment down below who you think is going to win the Super Bowl. But anyways, back to the video. Truly, I have no idea if Geno has what it takes to lead Seattle to a win against the San Francisco 49ers team that has won 10 straight behind stellar play on both sides of the ball. But the fact that he's gotten them there in the first place is why I'm even making the video. I doubt that many would have thought that the Seahawks would have a record even close to 500, so the idea of them going 9-8 and making the playoffs is pretty insane, and I think a lot of the credit goes to Geno.
Smith looking for Goodwin in the end zone. A little toe tap in the corner for the touchdown.
When his team needed him most, he stepped up to the bat and did his thing time and time again. And even though it hasn't always been perfect, and even though there's been a bunch of highs and lows, he's been able to maintain composure, which is a true sign of a leader. Geno may have played in the league for nearly a decade, but this is only his second full season as a starter, which is insane in its own right. But even crazier when you realize that the season was 2013, and that year he threw 21 picks.
Oh my God!
Sure, he's had help in the form of what could be the offensive rookie of the year in Kenneth Walker, and the somehow underrated DK Metcalf. But trust me, Seattle would not even be close to here in the first place if it wasn't for not just how well Geno is playing, but leading the team. To say that anything that's happened this season for the Seahawks makes all that much sense is just not true, because I'm sure most of the fan base couldn't have anticipated anything close to this. We'll see if Geno can get them a playoff win in the Bay. And you know what? I think they have a pretty good chance. But I'm just so happy for him that win or lose, this is an absolute W in my book.
I see this as an absolute win.
Looking past this season, because of how well Geno has played, it seems like the starting spot is all but his for the next few years, especially after making his first Pro Bowl this season. So if Seattle is able to keep adding great pieces like they did by drafting guys like Kenneth Walker and Metcalf, and upon that Geno can keep up his level of play, then I don't think some more playoff appearances in the near future is all that crazy a thought. Keep in mind that outside of San Francisco, their division is completely out of whack. So trust me, I think they'll have plenty of opportunities. And based on how well they've done this year, I think they'll be able to take advantage of whatever's next. I haven't even mentioned the fact that they have a Super Bowl winning coach in Pete Carroll at the helm. So if you add that to the fact that they have quite a bit of experience on their side with a lot of studs on their team, I think the Seahawks could age like fine wine these next few years. But hey, what do I know?
Absolutely nothing.
Anyways, why not throw it back to you guys and ask, do you think that Geno will be able to lead the Seahawks to a win against Purdy and the 49ers? Or do you think that's asking too much? Comment down below your thoughts. Geno Smith has done what many couldn't have even imagined going into a season like this. But crazy enough, he still has quite a bit left in the tank. So it should be exciting to see what he'll be able to do with the good old Seattle Seahawks.
Second and goal. Smith will keep. Big hole in the middle. Geno Smith runs it in for a Seahawks touchdown.
Thanks for watching the video. If you guys enjoyed, make sure to subscribe, like, turn on post notifications, and comment down below what stuff you want next. But anyways, see you all soon, and God bless.
The folks you said had written you off maybe? What do you say to them?
Yeah, they wrote me off. I ain't right back though.